Today, we had the pleasure of speaking with Brittany Barreto of Femtech Focus. She's a ball of energy and a person who's making things happen in the space.
You know, I found it so fascinating to hear about somebody from the genetics world, which I say with love and kindness. Geneticists are usually not that vibrant of people, you know. They're very factually oriented and statistically oriented, and they bury their heads in genes and genetics all day long.
But she's also totally honest about what's hard, what's difficult, the experiences that she went through. And so I hope people find that helpful. You don't have to look every minute like you have it all together, and you can still be strong and powerful and successful.
You know what I also found really interesting was her choice of starting out with the science of dating.
She described this concept from her genetic dating days, where she said chemically that opposites attract. What does that mean?
So in general, what she was trying to explain is that evolution and natural selection allow for us as humans to be attracted to people who have a much different gene pool than we come from. Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun-Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We're thrilled today to have our guest, Dr. Brittany Barreto, who wears many hats. She's a geneticist, she's a serial entrepreneur, she's a venture capitalist, and she's the host of the very successful podcast, Femtech Focus. Welcome, Brittany.
Thank you so much for having me. Could not pass this up.
Well, you and I have gotten the chance to know each other over the past couple of years. You literally burst onto the femtech scene and said, "Hey world, I'm here," and have made a huge impact. How'd you get here?
Well, you know, honestly, I was working as a venture capitalist in Texas in 2019, and I loved being on the investor side of things. It's way less stressful than the founder side of things, honestly. But I liked to kind of be like this secret internal spy for the founders. Like, I'm in the rooms with the VCs and I'm going to tell you the truth of what they're saying and like give you the real feedback you need in order to be successful. But the issue for me was that I was working in Texas and there was like a lot of oil and gas and software as a service. And I was just like, God, this is so boring. You know, like I can't do it. And I came across Femtech and I learned about Femtech, innovation for women's health and wellness. And I said, oh my gosh, that's me. That's going to be mine. And, you know, I tried to find a fund to apply for like a job at, and the only one at the time was Portfolio. And I was like, but like, where's the conference? Where's the podcast? Where's the meetups? Like, where are the femtech things that I can do? And I said, oh no, the little founder voice in me was like, it's you need to make it. And so March of 2020, we went into lockdown and I said, well, better time, you know, no better time than now to start Zoom interviewing people and put it on Spotify. And I mean, in less than a year, we have over 20,000 listeners in 88 countries.
Which is amazing. I knew it was very recent, but I didn't realize it was actually less than a year. This has come up a lot in a lot of our conversations, that certainly for Femtech and maybe yours for different reasons, that COVID has given us an opportunity to really start having these important conversations, either because in your case, you actually had the brain time, you know, to shut everything else off and create. And in addition to the fact that this has just become a much more popular topic. One of the expressions we keep using is, you know, femtech and women's health are like an overnight sensation that have been literally centuries in the making.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's really tough to tell everyone about this emerging market called vaginas. It's so crazy. Like, I know you've never heard of it before, but
That's my day to day and my bread and butter, the vagina world. So, my curiosity, because the geneticists that I know are a very different breed, how do you go from genetics to venture capital and, femtech? How does that transition occur?
well, in 8th grade, I learned about cellular biology, and I just fell in love with this idea that A, T's, C's, and G's make up who I am. And I don't know what it was. I feel really lucky that I became obsessed with it, and I wanted to do something in genetics. I thought I wanted to be a genetic counselor because I did know that I had a lot of like personal skills. But I don't know if any of our listeners have ever been to a genetic counselor, but I shadowed one for the day in college, and they spent their day telling women their babies were going to be sick. And I was like, I am way too sensitive for this. Like, I'm just going to cry every day. I kind of had a identity crisis. My advisor said, well, why don't you come do research in my lab? Turns out I'm pretty good in laboratory. But as you said, like, as I progressed in my career, my education, I was a PhD student at Baylor College of Medicine in genetics. And I just felt so weird. Like, to this day, I don't have any real friends from grad school. Like, I just felt like I mean, if anyone ever sees this video, I have a beanie on that says it's vulva, not vagina. And I have pink hair, and I, like, I have a pin that says stay horny on my shirt, right? Like, I just have always been really different. And I started to discover what other careers PhDs could do. And I found TMCX in Houston has a fantastic innovation center with funds and accelerators. And I just found my tribe, like these kind of crazy, kooky people that are like, I want to impact the world and go to Mars. And I was like, yes, like, let's do that. So that's kind of how I transitioned into entrepreneurship.
Your first company, I think it was your first company. Tell us a little bit about Faramore. You have a very interesting founder journey. You've had a couple of experiences. You've had incredible growth. You faced enormous challenges. Describe that experience where you built this company and then there were literally forces beyond your control that had to send you in a different direction.
Yeah, so Faramore was the first nationwide DNA-based dating app. So there's actually some really old, well-established science that you can predict who's attracted to who because of your HLA genes. These are genes that encode for proteins in your immune system, and evolutionary principles dictate that the more different your immune systems are, the more likely you are to feel physical chemistry. So I'd always tell people at the end of the day, if you forgot everything I said, opposites attract is biologically true. Right. So that's like the principle the whole dating app was made off of. Actually, very interesting. Like, the actual science behind it is about better sex and more orgasms for women. But at that time, I don't know. I just wasn't in a position of, I wasn't comfortable enough yet to brand my company to be like a better sex via DNA app. Who knows? In retrospect, maybe that would have made, blown up more. But it's actually really interesting to see my own femininity and growth and my comfortability with my body and sexuality and all these things. But nevertheless, I fundraised about 1.3 million from angels in Texas and built an app, and I launched it, and we were downloaded in every state. And what an adventure. It was awesome. The startup scene in Houston was new, so everyone knew me. I was the Faramore girl, right? Like, so awesome. I was raising my Series A, flying around the country, meeting with VCs. And then March of 2019, Apple changed their policies, of which they do every year for their app store. They update it. And they had never really had a policy around asking for DNA before. And we are in 2021. There are going to be biohackers. They're like, one day, not so far future, people will have a sequencing machine in their garage, right? And like, who knows what they'll do with it, whatever. But Apple, looking ahead, made a policy. Here's a list of apps that cannot ask for your DNA. Dating was on there. Yes, I tried to fight Apple, y'all, okay? When they kicked me off. Yes, I called them. Yes, I emailed them. Everyone's like, but didn't you? And I'm like, yes, I did. I tried everything, but they didn't care. And my Series A fell through, and I had to close my company, and I had a real identity crisis. It was probably one of the hardest times of my life. My hair was falling out. It was stressful. We don't talk enough about quote unquote failures. So I felt like I had let down every female founder that had ever existed.
Well, that's a lot of weight to carry on your shoulders. I agree that we don't talk about failure enough. And I often hear the expression where people say, I won't invest in someone unless they failed. I want them to have that experience. And I think that is all true. The part we don't discuss is what you just said, the incredible toll that it takes on the person who fails. And I don't like to use that word because it sounds like it's absolute and you did so many things right, but it is like a gut punch when something like that happens to you. And it does take a lot of effort to pick yourself up, brush yourself off, and as the song says, start all over again.
I literally had to grieve it. Right?
Oh, I bet you did. It's a loss. I mean, really, you put your heart and soul into it and every waking moment. What did you move on to once you picked up the pieces?
Well, I don't come from money and my company was a failure and PhDs are very expensive. So I immediately had to look for a job. So like literally I had a board meeting that week where we shut the company down and then I was on Indeed. So just so happens that there was a job opening for Capital Factory, which is the most active venture fund in Texas. And they're based out of Austin. And I had known them through, having been a founder. But they wanted to make a Houston branch and they were looking for a senior venture associate to lead the way and build their Houston branch. And I had the skill set for that. I knew the community, I knew the founders, I knew what Houston was known for, the resources we had, the things we didn't have. And it was really the perfect position for me. And it allowed me to breathe a little. I felt like if I make a mistake today, the whole company's not going to die. Like Capital Factory's on their 6th fund. I think I'll be okay. It allowed me some like grace and breathing room as I rediscovered like, all right, if I'm not Fairmore, who am I? What am I really excited about?
I love that expression. It gave you some grace and breathing room, which sounds like something that, certainly we all need, founders need, we need during COVID. So then you once again reinvented yourself. You had this great experience at Capital Factory. And then how long was it from there to the creation of Femtech Focus?
Here's today's hot flash. Today's hot flash really goes to the idea of a dating app that has to do with genetics. And I found an article that I think is so fascinating about how women on birth control pills actually may have different mate choice than they would have if they were not on birth control pills at the time that they chose that mate. And what is the reason for this? It may have something to do with the way our genes are put together and our pheromones, odors that we appreciate or that we find attractive or not attractive, that get changed when our hormones are altered. The pill works by eliminating ovulation, and this in turn changes what we are attracted to or who we are attracted to.
I would think about a year. I think I was starting to come across some femtech companies that I was like, that's really awesome. Like, that's really exciting. I came across Materna Medical and had a phone call with Tracy. I can remember calling, she's so sweet. She's like, I remember you called me, you said, I don't know what I want to do, but it's in femtech, and now you're like interviewing me on your show, right? So it's been really cool to see how many people I called and I said, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to do something, and then did it, right? And so like I said, the first thing I did was just start a podcast because I wanted a podcast because I wanted to hear from people in the industry about what the industry even was and what did it look like and what challenges were there, what exciting new things was there. And so I just said, well, I like talking to people and now I'm lonely because I'm in lockdown. So and Rachel, you were one of my first guests. And I just went from there, just kept talking to people. And now we interview like CEOs of publicly traded companies. We interview government officials. Like it's really, and people are asking, no longer am I begging people to come on? Now it's people are requesting to be on.
I looked through so many of your episodes and there were so many different subjects. So when you look through the, catalog of all these new inventions and things that have come to light, what sticks with you as one of the cooler ideas or something that really was a game changer?
Honestly, some of my favorite inventions and the things that are being worked on are some of the most basic ones. So I'm mentoring this founder right now who's creating the first medical device that helps keep the woman's abdomen open during a C-section. And I said, wait, what are you talking about? What do they use now? He said, hands. The rate of infection is very high because literally we still just use 2 nurses' hands to hold open a woman's abdomen when the baby comes out. And I'm like,
oh yeah, if you saw some of these like archaic instruments that we use to hold the belly open, you'd be mortified. So hopefully this was something soft and aesthetically pleasing.
Like an oval that cranks open. I'm like, someone in undergrad engineering could probably do this, right? Like,
amazing.
So I love the really like, I mean, I hate it, but I love it. Like these really basic, like if you intern for one day in an OB-GYN OR, right, you might see something that has a need. And then I really love creative ones that are also like just so obvious. Another founder I love to mentor is Frances at Awkward Essentials. And she has a post-sex cleanup sponge for women, of which I am a customer. She, fundraised $1 million like overnight, essentially. And then she rebranded, she relaunched, and she's already almost up to 6 figures in 90 days in revenue. And, I'm on a bunch of different founders have Facebook community groups that are private for their customers. And I see a lot of these groups where the customers are not necessarily like all complaints, but, early stage troubles of the hardware device or this, or confusing about how to use the app. And then I see companies like Awkward Essentials, where it's just literally like thousands of women being like, you've changed my sex life. Like I'm no longer, and like they're doing cool stuff, like not getting yeast infections due to the after sex cleanup now. And so like, and again, it's a sponge on a stick. Like the woman, Frances, she used to be a baker. Like she didn't go to like Stanford biodesign. She was a freaking baker. Like her Instagram is cakes with like specialty sprinkles.
Well, baking and sex have a lot in common, and there's a big cleanup after a lot of baking. So I get it. I will say this, one thing I always see in my practice are UTIs, urinary tract infections as a result of sex, and not really feeling like you want to get up and perhaps clean up a little bit. So that automatically sounds like something I want to look into for my patient population.
Talk about UTIs because I interviewed the founder of Eucora, which just today I have the TV on in the background and I saw a commercial for Eucora on like cable TV and I'm like, but also, I went to the interview with her thinking drinking cranberry juice solved your UTIs and that peeing after sex was actually a myth. And she was like, oh, no, opposite, girlfriend, opposite, And so like, even me, I'm all the time, my listeners know this, I'm on air, on record being like, yeah, I didn't know that about me. Thank you for teaching me about my own body as the host.
Never a dull moment. And there's always something to learn. I think I read something on your website about every founder who's doing something in the femtech space should have a physician on their panel. What's your theory behind that? And thank you, because I agree.
Awesome. Good. Yeah. Well, sometimes I see so many startups every day in femtech, and there are some that I get really excited about. This makes a lot of sense. Like this looks awesome. And then I show it to my co-founder, who's a pediatric gynecologist, and she's also the inventor of a vaginal stent, so a medical device. So she has that mindset as well. I'll show it to her, and she's like, "That is literally never going to fit in a uterus." Like, I don't know how they've gotten this far or that much funding, but if a doctor, an OB-GYN in particular, looked at this for a second, they would immediately let them know like that design is flawed. And so I feel like we have a real lack of vaginal models to test things out in. I think we have a real lack of research on what like materials work best in the uteri and stuff. But at the end of the day, like you need to get an MD to check on your stuff before you spend all your savings, you max out your credit cards. I feel like it's a very Theranos case study. So I, as a PhD in genetics, like, and also an entrepreneur in life sciences, like that story has been like just dug in my brain very quickly. For the listeners who don't know, Theranos was essentially a giant multi-billion-dollar company out of Silicon Valley, ran by this young woman who dropped out of undergrad and said she could cure everything with a drop of blood with this at-home test. And she essentially faked the data for years and she had billions in funding because no one asked a scientist like what they thought. And so now we have like all these scientists being like, hey, you should probably hire me for due diligence because I'll let you know like if that graph is real or not. And so it kind of fits into that story with me is like women's health is on the line. Let's not F this up. Like women are dying. That's how I feel about Femtech Focus. I'm like, I'm passionate about this because it's bigger than me. I'm just some lady with a microphone who's good at talking, I guess, right? Like women's lives are on the line. Black women are dying. Brown women are dying. We are dying, right? So we need this innovation. Let's not screw it up by not having asked a doctor.
I couldn't agree more. And I'm glad we're still going to be pretty useful now that we've all been sort of delegated to telehealth these days. But on the flip side, what kind of advice do you have for, say, doctors who have kind of like burned out from their clinical practice, or they just maybe aren't as enamored as they used to be, or just want a little change of pace, who want to go to this dark side and either go into femtech or go into consulting of, what you're speaking about?
Well, I welcome any MD if you are interested in getting outside of the clinic. You can join our virtual network. Just go to femtechfocus.org. There's a big button that says join our virtual community. Post there what you are, your specialty is or what you're into. I promise you, you're going to have 10 really amazing founders follow up with you. And if you want to ask me personally, hey, which one is the most ambitious that I should work with? I'm happy to give you a referral. But the other way, I'm actually very excited about this is, have you heard about Clubhouse yet?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. This is actually first time on record I'm saying this anywhere yet. I think Clubhouse is going to revolutionize femtech marketing because it is finally a space where we can say vagina and we can kick people off stage that misbehave and we can selectively decide who gets to speak and who doesn't. And it's a safe space for women to have their questions answered. And so I promise this is part of the answer to your question. Something I'm really excited about is I'm seeing all these rooms on Clubhouse that are being run by 2 or 3 gynecologists, and they are making, they're in between rounds, and they make a room and they say, I'll answer all your questions about fibroids. And you have 1,000 women in there from around the world saying, I went to the doctor and I felt this or that happened. And what do you suggest? And the doctors are so good about saying like, I'm not prescribing you anything. Like this is not a diagnosis, but I think I've actually had a few founders recently asking for, how do I find a medical doctor to give me some time? I said, whoever's making the rooms on Clubhouse, but on their drive to the ER for 10 minutes answering questions, they're the kind of people who want to like participate in everyday treatment and help outside of the clinic. So just go to Clubhouse. And I mean, I joined like 10 days ago and I have like 300 followers. I've made my Twitter account like 5 years ago. Twitter's my worst platform. I have like maybe 300, so like Clubhouse is booming right now.
So one of the things that I love, and I've loved about getting to know you and talking to you, is we share the same perspective that a rising tide raises all boats. And so the more we talk about this, the more we jump in, the more conversations we have, the more connections you make, like you just did with physicians on Clubhouse. And the more you even say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but it's a really important question. It's so needed and so exciting. And I wanted to add to something you said earlier, which is this is serious stuff. Women's lives are at stake. And I would also say on the plus side, some of these solutions can really transform how a woman experiences her life. Whether it's reduction or elimination of pain, whether it's an increase in orgasms, whether it's a reduction in incontinence symptoms, increased confidence, better ability to understand what's pleasurable for her. These are all so important. And it's not just fixing problems, it's also finding life-changing solutions that actually make your life better.
Rachel, I love that. I actually am almost disappointed in myself that I'm arguing the baseline is life or death for women, because really what we should be arguing is that women deserve it all, right? We not only deserve to survive and live, but we deserve to thrive, not just get over cancer, not just this, but then have great sex lives after, have, comfortable lives.
But I think it's one of the occupational hazards of being in this space. We spend a lot of time fighting City Hall, and we really want to get people's attention. And curing disease often makes people sit up and listen way more than, oh my gosh, here's a sexually satisfied woman, which, you know, in many settings actually terrifies people. So you've done all this. It's not even a year. You've been in quarantine. You are exploding with energy and enthusiasm and creativity and ideas and relationships. What's next for Femtech Focus?
Well, I guess the one big announcement I'd like to say is that on March 22nd, it is going to be our 100th episode. So we've been doing 2 episodes a week. It's so funny. About 6 months into it, I asked my employee, do you think we're ever going to run out of topics? She goes, girl, I got 600 people on the invite list. No, we're good. I was okay. So, and it's true now. I'm convinced we'll never run out of topics to talk about. But March 22nd, 100th episode. So we're going to have a little mini summit, 1-day event. Rachel knows that I'm very interested in how do we get into the investing world. I have all these founders and deals. I have all these investors and venture funds. Where do I find the connect? The first thing I'm going to do at March 22nd on our summit is actually do a reverse pitch. It's my favorite event to host. I've done it several times, but never in Femtech. It's where the investors actually have to pitch to the founders about the kind of deals that they're looking for. And it is an amazing experience where power dynamics are totally switched. I like to make it really fun. Like I time the investors and I buzz them off stage if they're too long, you know, like to make it fun. And the founders feel relaxed, like, oh, wow, investors are humans. And, you know, and it's just, I love shifting power dynamics and we're going to have a ton of fun. So look out for that.
Sounds exciting. Super exciting. Do you do it live? As a live event?
Yeah, we'll do it live during the summit. Yeah, I've done it before, like in Houston. We've done Houston reverse pitch competitions, and they've always been really well received. And so I'm excited to do it in Femtech. Also, just show, as I said 2 years ago, the only fund was Portfolio. Now we have Steel Sky Ventures, RIA Ventures, Avestria Ventures, Alta Angels. Like we have all of these. Portfolio has a second Femtech fund. So I also want to. You know, investors are nervous to get into an industry of which no one else is investing in. And so I actually am trying to promote, look at all this money that wants to be here. And if you're not in it, you should feel left out. Like you should want to be on stage too. And saying that you're putting money into this.
Well, like they say in Texas, right? Go big or go home. So I like that.
Thank you so much for spending time with us today, for all the energy and enthusiasm and transformation you're bringing to the space. As someone who's been in this since way before March 2020, it is amazing the impact that you've had in a short period of time. So keep it coming. We'll be looking for your next hit after hit after hit.
Well, you laid the groundwork for me to jump in it so intensely and it be a little bit easier for me. So I thank you.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.